email out into the chat box for everyone if you do have any questions or any concerns you'd like to run my way after the presentation. And thankfully for everyone, you do not have to spell my last name to email me. It's simply paul.d@thinkvine.com. So with that said, we'll dive right into this webinar, which is the third in a series of 3 webinars that ThinkVine has been doing with the ARF over the last month or two. And this third one is really focusing on what ThinkVine's agent-based approach to marketing mix is bringing to our customers, how customers are using it, and what is the value they're finding from it. And hopefully we'll be able to share that with you here today. As a quick overview of what agent-based modeling is and what ThinkVine is doing, I'm going to run through a couple slides up front that are talking about our approach in general to help set the stage, especially for anyone who was not able to participate in the earlier 2 webinars. So what exactly is agent-based modeling? Well, it's a type of model. It's a computational-based model that simulates the actions and interactions of autonomous agents with a view to assessing their effects on the system as a whole. So dictionary definition up top there. Key thing to know is, it's really an approach developed in the hard sciences back in the 40s and 50s and has been used by a variety of different groups over time. The Department of Defense has been using it, National Institute of Health, Boeing, many different companies. But historically not really used in marketing in the business world because the computational requirements of determining the behavior of all these agents, and you need thousands and thousands of them, really have been a gatekeeper to the approach. That said, in the late 2000s, 2008, ThinkVine began investigating how agent-based modeling could be applied to marketing mix, and as computational power has increased, we've been finding a lot of success and really been able to sort of stretch our legs and try new and different things as we progress. So why agent-based modeling for marketing, and why now? The key issue ultimately is the increasing complexity of today's marketplace. That's really the underlying driving force that we believe makes agent-based modeling a good solution for determining marketing mix today. And it really helps by staying focused on consumers and their behavior. Helps, answering accountability demands and making sure that, when the CFO comes by and says, okay, where's all this money that I'm spending on marketing going, you can answer that question with confidence. And it really helps take advantage of the wide variety of data that's available to marketers today and taps into that computing power that I mentioned before. So marketing mix, when you look at the options out there in the world today, while there's a wide variety, we feel that the majority of options are either regression-based mix or agent-based mix. And agent-based mix, again, the real difference that we're finding is that it's focused on consumer behavior. And that's a key differentiator between agent-based marketing mix modeling and regression-based mix modeling, which is focusing primarily on, week-on-week aggregate changes over time. So while there are a lot of differences between agent-based modeling and regression-based marketing mix modeling, ThinkVine's agent-based marketing mix modeling has a lot of similarities with regression in that we're using historical marketing sales data as inputs. We're including all sorts of data from the marketing mix, such as data on pricing and distribution. Both are going to incorporate, external factors such as economic changes, consumer confidence index, the weather, etc. Both of them are going to go through a calibration process to ensure that the models are accurate. I mean, if the model is not accurate, there's really no value to it. So it's of high importance that any model built for marketing mix is highly accurate. And both are going to provide really good historical insights on which marketing tactics have been driving what percentage of sales, the relative value of different marketing tactics, what's the ROI, etc. While there are all these similarities between the two, ThinkVine's agent-based approach to marketing mix has a number of advantages that, again, we believe are going to help in today's marketplace. Again, because it's focused on consumer behavior, we're able to understand differences between consumer segments using distributions across the different segments and not just averages and totals. We are able to generate very detailed, very accurate forward-looking simulations and forecasts across these different consumer groups, different geographies, etc. And additionally, we're able to determine the long-term effects of marketing over time and use those in driving those accurate forecasts going forward. Additionally, a very important key difference is agent-based modeling is not limited strictly to what has been observed historically. We're able to inform the agent population on a variety of different behaviors and use that to simulate and forecast the results of different marketing tactics that may not have been used before. So in summary, agent-based modeling, as ThinkVine uses it for marketing mix, offers significant advantages when compared to regression in today's market. Key among them is every virtual agent in our system is acting and behaving like a consumer that's out there in the real-life marketplace. We're modeling the consumer's response to marketing activities, not just aggregate week-on-week changes to align. And it's ultimately modeling that consumer's purchasing behavior, how they interact with media, how that increases their probability of making a purchase, and that ultimate purchase that they make. All ThinkVine agent-based marketing mix models are strictly validated and ensure that they're highly accurate to make sure that we can stand behind the forward-looking forecasts that we're generating from our models. And we believe this leads to actionable forecasts every time with every ThinkVine agent-based model. So with that background out of the way, we'll start diving into a number of different customer case studies that we've put together for you that will hopefully showcase a number of the different ways in which we're able to use ThinkVine's agent-based model to provide some really great, really solid results in terms of marketing mix. First up is a financial services case study. And this is a customer, like all customers out there, is looking to grow their revenue. And specific to them, had a real interest in adding not just more accounts, but specifically high-value accounts. And to do so, they had an interest in learning how they could best target their high-value customers, so a high-value customer segment. And they wanted guidance to understand, what could they expect from evaluating new media. They knew that as they wanted to go out there and reach those high-value customers, they might be using more new media, more tactics that perhaps they haven't been working with historically, but they had a hunch that maybe it might help them out. So first up, key thing we evaluated for them is because ThinkVine is modeling consumer behavior, we're able to evaluate results by different segments of consumers. So we're not limited to just that, that weekly average in total. What's the total movement on your sales and your marketing? By evaluating these different campaigns and different marketing tactics by different segments, we're able to determine which segments or which tactics are most efficient in reaching different segments. So in this case, segments 2 and 3 were of high-value customers for them, and they found that primarily digital tactics and TV were much more effective for driving those segments than more radio and print tactics. Additionally, again, because ThinkVine is able to include media consumption for a wide variety of mediums, not just those that were historically used by any of our customers, we can evaluate and forecast what might happen when those tactics are then used. So in this case, a big question that this financial services customer had was, we're thinking about going on mobile. We believe a lot of our high-value customers are using mobile. They're always on their phones and staring at their iPhone, et cetera. If we can put some ads on there, we would like to think that's going to help drive sales. In this case, we were able to forecast and simulate different scenarios for them that really proves that by shifting some of their spend from print, a lower performing tactic, into mobile would be a good investment for them. So by shifting some of their funding from print into digital, really we're able to see a 3% lift in their total account opens in 2012 compared to the scenario in which they were not using mobile. So again, that's forecasted based on media consumption behavior that we inform all of our agents with. And we can quickly validate that as time goes on. So if a customer believes, hey, this is really a good advice, a good thing that we should be doing, once true data happens as the actual activity is put into place, we can quickly evaluate that in the model and fine-tune and recalibrate to ensure that all forecasts are as accurate as possible. So that was our financial services customer. Another customer that we'll use here as sort of a center for a couple case studies is a retail customer. So in this case, this is a retail customer of ThinkVine that has historically driven their growth in their business with frequent catalog drops. So mailing out catalogs all the time, throughout the 90s and early 2000s was a key driver to their growth. They've been finding, though, as we move out of the early 2000s into the 2010s, that their youth-oriented customer base is primarily consuming digital media. So they've been investing more and more into different digital tactics, and they really want to understand, should they still be continuing to invest in catalog, or should they be moving more of their budget into these digital tactics? So one of the first things that ThinkVine was able to evaluate for them is by incorporating a very granular level of media data, so really capturing as much media in the model as they are able to measure. And in some cases, some of our customers have up to several hundred different marketing tactics all included in one model. We're able to show that the incremental sales volume driven by marketing has been growing year on year, both as a percentage of their sales as well as in total. And what we see in the chart here is we can see the contributions coming from different media types, primarily digital channels. So the big green and orange buckets at the bottom there are online promotion, unbranded search, really driving the majority of that growth. With catalog, their historical growth driver, in the last couple of years, only contributing a limited amount to that growth. So that purple bar representing just about 1% from catalog. So digital is driving their growth. Catalog's still driving it somewhat, but doesn't appear to be doing as good a job as their digital tactics. So if we look further into this and then take a look at what is the return on investment for each of these tactics, you can see that year on year the return tends to be growing for most tactics, and especially the digital tactics. And these digital tactics have an ROI that is dwarfing that of catalog. So catalog is still providing a positive return, just nowhere near as big as digital. And so they really need to know, okay, well, should we continue doing this? And it's key to note here that return on investment is a very valuable number that should be pursued, but you always need to use caution when pursuing high ROI tactics to ensure that not only is it going to give you a good return, it has the reach you need to drive your business. Something that has a very small reach and high ROI is only going to be of limited value. So what were we able to do? Well, ThinkVine's forecasting software platform has a built-in optimization tool that we call SmartMix. It's really a flexible tool, and we're able to use it to identify several different scenarios of what might happen as catalog drops change. So in an average year, this customer was sending out 8 different catalogs throughout the course of the year, and they want to know, well, if we were to reduce, from 8 catalogs to 6 or to 4 or to cut catalogs entirely, what would we do with that money? Where should it go? So we're able to use ThinkVine's SmartMix optimization to determine where it would go, and in most cases it was saying into the digital tactics, especially in this case display and email. So if they were to move it there, well, what would happen? This chart here then is going to demonstrate that the revenues would climb. So the incremental revenue, as they would reduce spend in catalogs and take that exact same spend, so spending no more in total, reinvest it into digital tactics, would lift sales, depending on the number of cuts, by 7, 13%, or 17% over time. So very key here to demonstrate to this customer that not only can we help them identify which tactics are driving their growth, we can quantify exactly what might happen if they were to reinvest their budget into those higher growth tactics. The third case study that we'll be taking a look at today is a consumer packaged goods customer of ThinkVine's. And this is sort of an interesting CPG customer in that they have historically gone dark in their advertising when commodity prices have gone up. So basically, as they feel a pinch and pressure on their buying side of the business, they've been cutting what they've been doing on advertising and going a little bit soft there. So with that sort of on-off cycle of going dark when commodity prices have been going up, we really needed to know about the long-term impacts of their marketing. What would happen when they're going dark, and whether or not there were any key consumer segments and consumer groups that they should really be directing their marketing at to help them get the most long-term effects of their advertising dollar. So one of the first things that we're able to do for them is evaluate the long-term impacts of their advertising. In ThinkVine's model, again, we're modeling consumer behavior, and the consumer agents in our model are building awareness and increased purchase probability as they are exposed to more marketing over time. So really replicating what happens, to real consumers. The more you see a TV ad, see something, on a website, or listen to something on the radio in your car that's talking about the brand, you're going to think more about it and perhaps influence you to make more purchases. Our agents behave in exactly the same way. Also in the same way, our agents are going to forget over time. So not only is that, additional awareness and purchase probability growing as an increase to marketing, it will also erode every time our customer is going dark with their marketing. So what we're able to determine for them is the marketing that they put on each year is having an effect forward into the future up to 4 years out. So it's very important to them that they can do the best job possible with their marketing to ensure that they get the maximum impact over time and that they do their best to capitalize on that and really not let it decay too much by going too dark for too long. This chart here shows what happens when you go dark, and we've labeled the high cost of recovery because for this customer we found that when they do go dark, it really does hurt them quite a bit. What we have here is we use ThinkVine's forecasting software to test out two different scenarios. The green line here represents sort of the baseline scenario in which the media spending and the advertising investment remained consistent with plan over time. So no going dark, no cuts, and just kept things going, as they would under normal business situations. The blue line then represents what happens if the media is shut off in 2011. So if during 2011 commodity prices had jumped for them, they cut out the media spend for the rest of 2011 and say the first quarter, you start to see those two lines diverge, and it gets to be quite a large gap. Once you roll into 2012 then, the media budget would have been reinvested, would have come back on, and you can see the lines sort of come back together as the marketing in 2012 and 2013 work to close that gap of that potential lost sales. Key findings that we found is that the marketing budget in 2012 and 2013 would need to be nearly double what the marketing budget historically is in any given year in order to close that gap, and that there's up to 40% lost revenue in terms of incremental revenue driven by marketing each and every time they go dark. So very key findings for this customer, very important to them to understand that pursuing sort of that short-term goal of saying, oh no, we're a little pinched for money, we should cut the marketing budget, need to understand what the long-term effects of that are so that they can make the best possible informed decision about where their dollars should be going. Also important for this customer was to say, okay, well, we recognize that we shouldn't be going dark as much and we need to be very careful and cautious with it, but it is an inevitability of their business. Are there any different consumer segments that might best respond to long-term advertising activities and really help grow the business, even when they are going dark? So what we found is by looking at two different customer segments, their loyal customers versus their sort of non-loyal new trial customers, two different things happened. Loyal customers, anytime you market directly to them, creates a larger first-year impact, which makes sense. These people are buying your product all the time. As they see more ads for them, they might think about it a little more often, and they might happen to go to the store in the week or weeks following when they're exposed to advertising. The trial customers and the new brand loyals are a bit different. These are customers that are not already buying the product week on week. And as they are exposed to it, that trial can lead them to potentially become a new brand loyal. This is a very important behavior and dynamic for this customer to understand and really help show that different campaigns perform differently amongst these two groups. And very important to them, they should be focusing on those campaigns that would help drive the creation of new brand loyals, because those new brand loyals would continue to buy the product a little more often even when they were dark. So it helps maximize the effects of their advertising over the long haul. Semi-related to this issue of the long-term effects of the advertising, but a little bit different. For the same customer, we were able to determine the optimal mix for them. So again, using ThinkVine's Smart Mix software, determine what the optimal mix is, not only in terms of the level of spend, but which tactics it should be spent in, and what times of year it should be spent. So the two different lines here, the line with the green dots representing their current mix and what the saturation point is, a point of which a dollar spent on marketing is going to yield $1 in sales, and the saturation after ThinkVine optimized the mix with the orange points, really just demonstrating that your ROI and your return on investment and your potential upside and ceiling room on incremental revenue from your marketing is going to be very dependent on not only how much you spend, but how it is you're spending. In this case, we're able to help them find that point, which is a budget of about 15% higher than where they were. Our final case that we'll be looking at here is a nice tropical beach, which I don't know where everyone on the phone is listening from, but here in Chicago it's a lovely gray day. It looks nothing like the beach. But for this customer, a travel and entertainment customer of ours, they had a very specific need. They needed to make a data-driven case for their budget. And that case that they were able to make using ThinkVine's approach ultimately led them to using our software for a collaborative agile planning process between them, their ad agencies, and ThinkVine. So not a tremendous amount of detail on this slide here, and that's very specific because, when we're talking about one of our customers' budgets, we need to be cautious about what data is out there. But the key point is that the management at this company came to the marketing team and said, this is your sales goal for the year. The marketing team really felt they were not going to be able to reach that sales goal with the budget they had. But just simply saying, hey, this isn't enough is not enough to make a case. It's not something that is going to be given a lot of credence by most management teams. So they were able to turn to their marketing mix model as built by ThinkVine to help make a data-driven case for what their budget should be. So we were able to use, again, ThinkVine's Smart Mix optimization within our software to determine what the optimal budget should be to reach the sales goal by basically saying, this is the sales goal for the year. This is what we need to reach. What should the budget be? We're able to come back and say that the budget needed to be about 10 to 15% higher if the sales team were to have any hope of actually meeting their sales goal for the year. By taking this data-driven case to their management, they actually were approved for a higher budget for the first half of the year. And after a 6-month period passed, we're able to prove out that they ended up plus or minus a couple percentage points right on goal. With that confidence in the forecast built, management was pretty happy that the sales goal was reached for one, and they were also convinced in the approach and the forecast that ThinkVine provided to them that they released the remaining of the marketing budget for the year, and sales goal was able to be reached throughout the full year. Additionally, then, through that process, by sort of proving out that ThinkVine's forecast was leading to very accurate results for them, this led to integration of ThinkVine's software platform, not only with the customer, but with our customers' media agency partners. As a result of the media agency partners, anytime that they would recommend any changes to the marketing mix, we're first testing those changes in ThinkVine software. So basically, they were able to go in and say, this is the current plan. What happens if we increase this, decrease that, etc.? What would happen to sales? And determine, okay, these are the scenarios that are working. These are the only ones we should bother bringing back up to the customer. Ultimately, this led to a very collaborative approach and a collaborative working space between our customer, their ad agencies, and ThinkVine. So ultimately, what we've been trying to make the case for here today is that ThinkVine's agent-based modeling for marketing mix really helps deliver results. We've shown you a number of different cases today, and hopefully we've been able to demonstrate to you the ways in which we're able to help our customers target their high-value consumers, help them evaluate new media, perhaps new media tactics they are yet to try, to help them understand where to best invest their marketing dollars, and also help them understand the long-term impacts of their marketing and what happens when they cut back budget and they start to go dark. We also just looked at a case in which data was used to make a firm case for a higher budget, and how ThinkVine software is really helpful for establishing a collaborative agile planning process across all the different stakeholders in a marketing plan. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today, and I will begin to answer any questions. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, and I will take a look at what we have in here and answer them as best I can. Okay, it looks like what our first question here is from Dan asking how granular we are able to get with our models, and how have we been able to look within various mix elements, for example, at network program level for TV or a site level for digital. The short answer to that question is we are able to get as granular as data is available. Like any other analytics approach, we are constrained by the data that goes into it. So if data is able to be provided, basically media is able to be measured by different networks, by different day parts that are for TV, or by different site level for digital, it absolutely can be incorporated into our models. I mentioned earlier when we were looking at one of our slides, when I talked about granularity, that some of our customers have, I think one of them has, somewhere between 400 and 500 different marketing tactics all being evaluated in one model. That's quite a monster there. Most, I'd say, are more around the, 100 to 200 different tactics being captured in a model. But if the data is available there, it can be incorporated. And one of the benefits of our agent-based approach is we are less constrained by issues of degrees of freedom as you would be in a traditional regression-based mix where you're looking at, weeks as your unit of analysis. So hopefully that helped answer your question, Ken. I'll take a look at what other questions we might have. So we have a question coming in, how does our agent-based model handle social media? So we are able to handle social media like digital media or any other media by transforming whatever information is available on that media into a reach curve. So reach ultimately becomes a common currency that any of our marketing inputs are acting on the agents with. So any measures that are available on the social media in terms of how many people are seeing it, what types of people are seeing it, so we can ensure that, the correct consumer segments within our agent population are seeing it. All that kind of information is used to incorporate it directly into our model. See if there are any other questions here to respond to. There's a question about what types of data go into our model, and our data for our model is a little bit different than what is done in a traditional regression-based marketing mix. Where we're similar is we're using the same initial inputs as the marketing plan. So, how much was spent in each media and when was it spent. So the marketing plan aspect is the same from an agent-based approach or a regression-based approach, as well as sales then. So the week-on-week sales are usually the output of the model. And again, that's similar between a regression-based approach or agent-based. Although, we can also use different dependent variables, different outcomes. So it doesn't need to be sales. It can be store visits, account opens, et cetera, whatever the key dependent variable must be. Where we start to differ from regression-based approach in terms of data that goes in the model is we need to inform the agent-based, agents in terms of the media consumption. So we set them up based on demographics to ensure they're representative to the U.S., and that comes from census data that we're able to provide, as well as the media consumption data. How many hours a day are they watching TV? What channels are they watching TV? How much radio, et cetera, et cetera. And that's coming from a variety of syndicated media consumption sources that ThinkVine brings to the table in any engagement. Looks like we also have an additional question, a sort of follow-up to the granularity question, asking the application for the buying side of the agency marketer is clear. How feasible would it be for a seller to leverage this? A big part of that would be your opinion on how good of a model you could build with a third-party / syndicated data versus from the advertiser. Let me make sure I understand that question before I start to answer it. How feasible would it be for a seller to leverage it? Okay, I think the question ultimately is for a seller of media space, so selling advertising. How would they be able to leverage ThinkVine's model? I can say that we have actually a number of customers that we have worked with to build models that are sellers of media, basically to prove the case that positive ROI can be yielded from advertising on their particular platform for selling. So we've definitely done that. We do have some feasibility with that, but a good model can still be built, but it is a good point that it tends to be then third-party syndicated data going into it as opposed to data directly from the advertiser. So it is entirely possible, but again, it's going to be limited based on the data available, the data that can be acquired, and that can be handled either by purchasing that third-party syndicated data that's mentioned in the question, or potentially by going into a partnership with an advertiser to get their data firsthand, which there are pros and cons to both approach. But again, we have a number of customers in which we have been building models from a seller's point of view. And one more question we have in here is asking how many consumer segments we can have in the model and whether or not there's a recommended number. It's a very good question, and any time that we're breaking the agent population down into subgroups within, whether they are customer segments or geographical regions or things of that nature, I would say the sweet spot tends to be about 6 to 8 different groupings within. In certain cases, we have been able to do more. It really just depends on the specific situation you're working with. But I'd say, 10 or less is probably about the expectation to have for any model we're building. But again, it's all going to depend on the specific situation we're working with, and we're happy to talk about different options for what we can do in cases in which there are more, because there are options and there is some flexibility in the model. I think that is looking like most of the questions in here. If there are any other questions, feel free to pop them up there in the chat box now. If I see them in the next, 10 seconds or so, I'll try and answer. Otherwise, again, I'd like to thank everyone for your time. And any further questions and follow-ups, feel free to email me directly at paul.b@thinkvine.com. And thank you again for your time.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. It was such a pleasure having you present today. And again, this presentation will be posted on demand in about 2 weeks. And I'll be sending Paul's email information to everybody who participated. Thanks again, Paul.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.